check out these awesome Shadowversity hoodies that we now have available for you guys right now.
These things we've been working on behind the scenes for a couple of months, and we are very proud to finally be bringing these things to you. They are based on the brigandines that me and Shad both wear. Obviously those brigandines are quite expensive, but everybody can pick up one of these for a nice affordable price.
I call these stealth medieval, where it's not so out of the ordinary. People think that's weird, why are you wearing it? But also to the keen observer, they will see that's a brigandine.
Finally some merch that you can wear in public and it's okay. We're very happy to bring these to you guys. Links in the description, check them out. They support the channel, and yeah. Really
high quality, by the way. No expenses spared. These rivets are sewn on. We've got stealth logos. The material is nice. It's got you know, some thickness to it. I love them. This is gonna be a standard jacket I'm wearing. Check them out. Grab one yourself while they're there. Limited time, so grab them while we have them available.
Shadowversity.
Shad-san!
Zundeesh biofananend.
Yoroshiku, Tairen-san.
Shadow. I don't know what I'm doing. That was more Japanese sounding. Okay, you can clearly see what this video is. It is Vikings versus Samurai. Who would win?
Yes, and the reason we're able to do today's episode is because we got this massive battle ready, which you know what that means in an upcoming video, samurai gear. And we thought, why not do a quick little, let me get this off, a little video just discussing some differences.
Well, this is the thing, right? I have made many a video on samurai versus knights. Samurai versus Viking is actually a more interesting matchup when I think about it.
Why is that?
Well, before we get into the whys, I haven't done Samurai vs. Viking yet, so that's what we're going to be exploring here. Right. And so the purpose of this, because whenever you do these matchup videos, a lot of nuance is missed, okay? Because the reality is, who would actually win is whoever is the more vicious, ferocious, talented warrior, okay? The warriors who are either at a disadvantage from arms or everything like, they can win through skill, luck plays a component, and so this discussion isn't going to be saying whoever we kind of feel has the edge, that they're going to win every time.
Well, I feel like there's a caveat there, because usually when you do something like a sword comparison, it's a bit more one-to-one. When it comes to armor types though, there's light armor and there's heavy armor, there's different classifications of armor. So Samurai versus Viking is a little bit different, because this is very much like this is like a heavy armor type, you know?
Yes and no, because it's more flexible than other types of armor, and you technically have areas that are not armored versus a Viking. If just wearing a full chainmail hauberk, I have some coverage.
I'm not gonna say anything inflammatory there. But you know, just some stuff there. All right, anyway, continue.
So, we have grabbed out all the iconic weapons of each warrior type and then discussed with the weapons and armor who probably has the edge in terms of their armaments, because that's really all that you can come to. You can't say one is always going to beat the other no matter what,
right?
But one, you can more objectively come to a conclusion as to which side might have the edge in terms of weaponry and stuff.
Yes, okay. Well, I've already got my answer, so you know.
We're
save it for the end.
We're going to break it down and go the pros and cons of like each one, like who has, you know, better weapons against armor, who has better weapons for range, who has better weapons close in, who can deal with the opponent's. Yes, and we'll look at some of the classic tactics as well.
Right.
So we are able to do this, as Tyreth mentioned, thanks to the affiliate sponsors that we have here. Romance of Men provided this awesome armor.
I know I'm not wearing it 100% correct. It's raining and we've got to get this done.
Also this actually really great sword, very good price. But we also were sent this awesome Viking sword by Honshu. This Dane axe head, Cult of Athena. And so we actually have affiliate links for all these excellent suppliers. They make great gear. And so let's break down some of the iconic items. Tyrant, pick out your favorite out of the samurai weapons.
My favorite would be this.
Okay, so notice how Tyrant didn't reach for the katana.
Well, the katana, this is one of those things that annoys me. Is like pop culture has made the katana the staple. It's made it like, you know, the awesomest thing in the world. But it's actually, relatively speaking, a short sword.
It's a shorter sword for being two-handed.
Oh, it's not a short sword. It's a shorter sword.
Yes, specifically for being two-handed. And its widest period of use was actually a bit after the samurai were being employed on the battlefield to a heavy degree. There's overlap, don't get me wrong, but the actual samurai sword for the battlefield
was this. And you can see why, because this is much more comparable to something like a longsword. This thing has extra reach, it has extra length. It's just overall more robust.
Yes. We're talking about the tachi, essentially. This is an O-katana. There's some subtle differences. I have a video on it. But essentially, you're looking at a sword that big, which is a more battlefield-oriented sword.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's your favorite weapon for the samurai. But interestingly enough, that sword was their backup weapon. It wasn't their primary weapon the samurai used on the battlefield. For the Viking, the favorite weapon I have for the Viking for me is a trusty old round shield. This is like, you rarely separate a Viking from his shield. You can't look at really Viking. There are cases where they might be using a weapon that needs two hands, but for the large majority, Viking and his shield is the way to go.
Right.
Like, look at this loadout, man.
So it's interesting when it becomes, like I said earlier, armor types. The weapon that you're going to take against a specific armor type is going to vary depending. Now, something like this armor, I wouldn't want any of this sort of stuff. Like, for the most part, none of it's going to work the best.
Well, let's point that out. Let's expound upon that. Because say you grab the tachi, right? We have thrown tachi and katana up against chainmail before.
Yes.
It can barely get through.
You're not going to be able to cut through it in terms of thrusts. This is where it gets interesting. If it's something more like a spring steel one, something with a bit more, modern materials, you're probably going to get through. It's a little difficult, but you can do it. When it comes to something a bit more traditional, however, getting through is just, you got it 50-50.
You also have the added problem
of a shield, yes.
Of this.
Yeah.
And the shields were made to be somewhat destructible. I'm not sure how a samurai would account for getting a sword chop stuck in a shield. They twist it and then counter. So just looking at the standard sword arm that the samurai uses versus the Viking, you need to consider, can these weapons get through the opponent's armor? The tachi is going to struggle. I think a Viking sword, there are areas on samurai armor that this could get through. Yes,
but like I said, like every single armor that we've tested, whether it's mail, whether it's plate, whether it's whatever it may be, usually the best thing to get through armor is a blunt force type of weapon. Something like the Beck, something like an axe or a pick.
Let's move to the armor combating weapons, but just for the swords, out of this comparison, I've got to give the edge to the Viking. The Viking actually has a chance with their sword to get through the samurai defense. Where, look, you could get through your Viking defense, it would just be much harder. We've seen how ineffective a katana is, and there's very few open spots on a full hauberk where the samurai armor, your armpits are exposed, your neck is exposed, your shoulder is exposed, like we can see right here.
Yes. I can go either or in that particular case. You know, with those two weapons, I think you can argue either way.
Okay. There is going to still be debate after our video. You know what I'm thinking we should do? There will be debates forever.
Forever.
In conjunction with putting out this video, let's put a community tab poll. That everyone who watches this video, and we'll mention at the end of the video, go and vote on the poll to see who the community thinks would win, samurai or Viking. Okay, so in my opinion, I do think the Viking, the sword category, gives the edge. Okay, what about armor combating weapons? Now, this is a tricky one.
Right.
Because the samurai, they don't.
What about the bow, okay? Because this is where it's interesting. What poundage bow did they have?
We will come to that in a bit later.
Okay.
First, armor combating weapons. Now, the samurai, the Japanese, I should say, did have axes, but they weren't stereotypically used very regularly by the samurai. They also did have like things like war picks, not as like the more common weapons of the samurai, and this is probably one of the most, was the spear.
The spear, yep.
So the yari, and look, we know this isn't a yari, but it's a placeholder for Japanese spear.
Yep.
This was just the more common samurai weapon overall through most of history.
When it comes to spears, it's usually the type of head you've got on there will depend how you get through armor. What is it?
Your spear is floppy.
It is, yes. It needs to be fixed. It's having performance anxiety.
Yes, stage fright. Just give it some lenience, okay?
Yes, but spears, especially when they're thrown, can usually get through lots of different types
Lots
of
of
armor.
different types of armor.
And especially if you have a head built for that sort of thing. Yeah.
A lot of force though. Here's the thing though, Vikings also had spears.
Yes. Mine's bigger.
Your spear is bigger. Mine's a lap one.
Yes. Yours is thicker.
Mine's thicker. It's not the size, it's how you use it. Okay, I think this is a bit of the armor. All right, backup armor kind of combating weapons. The samurai have the kanabo. This is actually on the shorter end.
Yes.
Usually kanabo come up to here.
Yes.
They're bigger.
Any sort of blunt force is pretty good against armor.
Pretty good.
And especially something like this, which doesn't have any structure behind it, you can deal blunt force through mail.
The question is that more effective?
No. No, it's not.
Than the date axe?
No, it's not.
It is simply not.
It's not.
And so for armor like this, I almost don't care what a samurai is wearing, helmet or not. You get a full powered hit in by this, they're not going to be happy.
That's kind of where spoiler alert, there's a reason why I think this is more effective, and it's purely down to the weapons. It's not the armor itself. Mail is actually really good. It gives you good flexibility.
Really good.
It's not too heavy, but at the same time, obviously you don't have full plate, but the drawback, a Beck is going to get through both of them. Type thing,
Yeah.
So what gets through one is probably going to get through the other anyway. I would go for something like mail. It's pretty good.
So this is the important caveat we need to mention. The samurai armor was made intentionally to be more kind of maneuverable, primarily for the reason that samurai were archers and also horsemen. They needed more maneuverability and flexibility. Now, the horse angle is going to be interesting because we don't have a horse here, but that needs to be included in the consideration. That is one of their standard armaments. We'll come back to the horse. But in terms of armor combating weapons, I got to give the edge to the Viking.
I agree, simply because you have a Dane axe, you have you have lots of...
We also have normal axes. This is, I know, spike on the back, but ignore that. But
lots of blunt force weapons, basically.
And added the fact that I think the hauberk has pros and cons compared to samurai armor. Samurai armor is plate armor, but it is more covering. And so that makes it equivalent, except the fact that then they have this.
Yes. So I factor in my bias, if you will. I agree as well that, yes, something like the Viking has the edge in those regards.
Okay. We have talked about archery. Vikings absolutely had their types of bows, longbows even. A bow is an ancient weapon. The thing is though, Vikings aren't known for favoring the bow or using it as a primary weapon in their armies. They definitely use them. And when I say primary, I mean that's their go-to. They always default to the bow. Look, there's probably cases of large battlefields of, and we know Vikings is more of a occupation. These are more the Norse or Scandinavian people of the early medieval period. The thing is, though, the samurai were known to be very good archers. They trained with them extensively, and they have an additional advantage. They're mounted archers, which gives them huge maneuverability. Yeah.
So something that I don't know is what was the poundage?
It's debated.
Right.
And I've never found a definitive thing. Having said that, I haven't found a definitive thing for the Viking longbows either.
Right.
We can logically assume for both bows, they would be somewhat high poundage because they're being used in warfare.
Okay.
And if you're wanting to punch through, samurai did have certain elements of mail. There's mail here. If you want to punch through armor to any degree, you're going to need high poundage. The difference between the poundage debate in warfare when you compare it to English longbowmen who had more exacting standards, and it was a more, this is literally the thing. It was a more standardized, uniform kind of weight range. I think when it was less standardized, it was whatever you could draw. Right. And there would be people amongst the army that probably could easily draw 100, 110, 130, even 150 pounds. Right. But anyone wants to use a bow, they're shooting them in warfare. Look, 70 pound, and they probably weren't even weighing them. They're just like, this is a really heavy bow. And so it's probably got more ranges of lenience, but they definitely would have had high poundage.
Because when it comes to something like a bow, the type of arrow and the poundage is going to play a big part if it's going to be able to bust through something. For example, with this mail, which is riveted mail, I think the 100 pound was just able to get through. Like, we're talking just. So poundage does play a big... And that sounded weird. But
in the same sense, I think the Viking bows would be able to get through certain parts of samurai armor. There's openings for it. The thing that gives one side the edge over the other, the samurai, it's definitely the horses, the mounted archery. The thing is, though, the Vikings do have a pretty effective counter.
Yes, but keep in mind that samurai are also more known for their archery, so I would give it to them just more in, like, skill points.
You know, like, this is hard for me to determine, because the shield will give a good amount of coverage from arrow fire.
It does.
Okay? And this is where I think a lot of people are going to have their own subjective opinions, which might vary their conclusion, because Viking shields actually weren't that thick. Okay? Todd from Todd's Workshop has done tests of high poundage bows versus shields. Even the thicker heater shields, unless they had really creative layering methods on the surface, we're talking more than just rawhide. Arrow fire could bust through even thicker shields. Because we have surviving record remains, and they're usually from the clips of the shields, which gives us an indication of how thick the edges were. You'd be surprised. I think a lot of those arrows will punch through the shields.
Yes, but there's not going to be enough energy after they've done that to do much.
They could incapacitate an arm, hit a head.
Sure.
And then it also, if there's enough arrow volleys from, the samurai, it doesn't give you a full... There's things could possibly get through. So it's really hard for me to determine. I'm either saying the shield evens the playing field and no side gets an edge, or it just inches its way in favour of the samurai because of the manoeuvrability.
I would give it to the samurai for that, especially if they're mounted as well. I'm more than willing to give it to them,
Okay. Now that we've talked about the mounted side of the combat, let's just talk about literally that, the mounted side of the combat. All right, I could potentially concede the samurai having an edge with mounted archery. Okay, this then, opens up the discussion to horse-mounted combat generally with the samurai. Do the samurai have an edge because they are essentially cavalry?
Yes.
Over, you think it does?
I think they do.
I'm not sure.
Horses are terrifying. They also, any way you slice it, just even like a travel perspective, you have to walk in your gear, you have to walk across you're tired.
Okay,
having a horse, makes you more refreshed. Also, facing a horse on the battlefield, every Dark Souls game has taught me I don't want to do that. So
if you're using a cavalry, we're not really going into the logistics. If you add logistics, then the horse is an extra mouth to feed, essentially.
True.
They take more men to things. So let's focus on the combat, right? And samurai, specifically light cavalry, I have not really found many accounts of them occupying the role of heavy cavalry, specifically the shock charge, shock warfare, where they are heavily armored, they have a mounted lance-like weapon, and it's made to punch through enemy lines. They are usually used, like I said, light cavalry, circular kind of tactics, hit and run.
The thing is, you still have a spear, you still have horses, and you still have bow. I give that to the samurai simply because if I'm on foot having to face those ranged sort of weapons, no thank you.
But this is the thing, the Vikings would have bows to shoot at the oncoming cavalry from the samurai. And the thing that I think evens the playing field massively in this regard is the shield.
The shield is a good equalizer.
Exactly, because even though I think this might have weaknesses against strong arrow fire, that we know that they were made thin and destructible, this gives them a really serious edge with the oncoming attacks, even from a mounted opponent, because if that spear lands in the shield, it's going to go through, but not enough to kill someone, I think, and then it'll get trapped. Same with sword strikes. And that could potentially dismount the samurai.
Perhaps. I'm not saying no, but I'm saying I think you are disregarding how much power and force would be transferred into a shield from somebody on a horse hitting that shield.
I think you might be making that force too big for light cavalry because it's not a couched lance. A couched lance has a lot of bracing.
Yes.
Their saddles are made to keep them and push the force in. But the samurai, because they're, horse archers, like they're made to be able to get up high, be loose and maneuverable, and that restricts the amount of power that they can throw behind a spear.
I don't know, man.
See, I think this one actually is even. I'm not sure I could give the edge to the samurai because of this equalizer right here.
A shield just in general, I don't care who's got the shield, is a great equalizer. I can agree with that. I still would probably give it to the samurai just because mounted combat is, it's a bit extra.
So, because if we're just doing 1 versus 1, I'm not sure the mounted aspect, because they have to close the distance essentially to try and beat them anyway, except if they're using archery. That's where that gives them the big advantage, because then they can just keep their distance, circle the Viking, ping at them, and if the Viking wants to shoot at them back with their own bow, they lower their shield, which gets rid of most of their defenses, and they're boned.
Yeah.
I would almost give the samurai mounted archery a double edge.
Okay.
Mounted samurai with a bow versus just a Viking with every option of their kit, I would actually say samurai wins. Because I don't see how a Viking could beat... He can't close the distance. The samurai is just too maneuverable on the horse.
That's specifically mounted, though. As soon as it's one-on-one like this sort of thing,
as soon as you take out the horse,
I would give it to the Viking purely just because the moment you have something like a Dane axe or even the shield, they can change everything.
I think this is what's actually helping me reach the conclusion. It's on foot, the Vikings actually have almost, I would say, the more edges an advantage, especially because they got the shield and axes.
Right.
The shield gives them huge amounts of defense. Axes give them huge amounts of offense to get through armor.
Also, the maneuverability of something like this is way more than this, which is, it's not bad or anything. It's just that is pure articulation. Yeah.
And the Kanabo, it's just not better than a Dane axe.
Yeah, a Dane axe for armor, any sort of blunt force stuff is probably a good bet.
Let's throw a wild card in.
Okay.
What about the Nodachi?
So this one's an interesting
It's not a hugely prevalent samurai weapon. In fact, it's a specialized one that they say was used more against horsemen.
Okay, so here comes the thing. It's like, what type of steel we're using? See there, that's where it changes everything. Because if it was differentially hardened, I would say this thing would probably be even worse than this thing already. This is spring steel, and I don't like it.
We tested it. We have a full review of this Nodachi.
Now, this one isn't perfect. This handle should be a lot longer, but at the same time, it doesn't change up the basic core concepts of the blade.
Yes. I do not think that gives a samurai a particular edge, though we can try and break it down a bit. The samurai will attack with that. The Viking will block with the shield, and it'll definitely cut into the shield, and then it gets trapped. And the Viking does their classic twist, knock it out, push it aside, come in, hit.
Are we talking just purely a sword?
Sword or axe?
Sword. Because if they've got the axe, like specifically this, not the Dane axe.
It could be out of range.
I think the extra range could even it a bit.
Could even it.
But the moment they have something like a Dane axe or a spear, I still give it to them.
Exactly. A spear versus a Nodachi, I would actually give the edge to a spear. Yeah. The Viking loses their shield, but then they're basically equivalently armored then. Yeah. I would actually say shield and Viking sword versus Nodachi, I would give the edge to the Viking. Yeah. The shield counts as the sword completely.
I would too, yes. Shields are they're so good. So don't tell Nate I said that, anybody. Don't tell him I said that. But shields, yes, are very good.
So in conclusion, I think that's the answer. If the samurai get their horse, they dominate. But if they are on foot, I would actually give the edge to the Viking.
And see, the thing is, I think personally it just comes back down to weapon type versus the armor type. If you have plate armor, if you have something like this, if you have blunt force against this, you're gonna do well. If you have something like a regular sword, then you're kind of even. You know, a sword against both of these things is gonna be pretty even. The Dane axe, though, will probably smash through both of them. So,
you know, I keep holding the Nodachi. So let's, Nodachi versus Dane axe. Viking samurai with these weapons. Oh, this is an interesting one. Here's the thing.
I would have to give it to the Dane axe, just because if this is differentially hardened, a hit on the side of this blade, this long,
that will actually break.
Yeah.
Well, like, and if both these weapons clash,
Yeah.
the Dane axe has so much weight and power behind it,
Yeah.
it could seriously bend and damage a traditional historical Nodachi quite easily.
Yeah.
And then the question is, could a Nodachi get through a riveted chainmail hauberk?
I have no idea. That's actually something I have genuinely no idea about.
It will not cut through.
It will definitely not cut through. But when it comes to getting katanas through these, which are short swords, which means you should have more power at that, they're okay.
I think thrusting would be even more difficult with a Nodachi.
Yeah, I think that is terrible.
And the Dane axe, there are many ways that you would injure. So I think the Dane axe gets the edge again.
Yeah.
So in a lot of these matchups, we're seeing the Viking, in my opinion, with their standard kit of armaments, has more advantage over a samurai with their standard kit.
And this isn't to say that samurai or anything.
Yeah.
If you gave the samurai the Dane axe, I'd be half the time I'd be like, yeah, the samurai would win. It's purely down to these weapons and what they're up against.
And look, and we've acknowledged, as soon as that samurai's on a horse and give them their bow, they wipe the field.
Yeah.
So, like, the poll that we're going to put is mostly just for the on-foot comparison. I'm not sure we can do a double poll on the same one. But I think most people would agree that samurai, they're going to dominate with that horse and archery. But what do you guys think for the on-foot comparison, samurai versus Vikings? Go vote in the poll. And if you're interested in any of the items we showcased in this video, look at how awesome this armor is.
This is the battle-ready Romance of Men samurai armor.
They say battle-ready.
Which we're going to put to the test, obviously.
We will put that to the test, baby. But Romance of Men makes some seriously good quality stuff.
And we have some stuff coming up with them as well, because we enjoy what they... I know the name is a bit odd to us Westerners.
It is an odd name.
But hey, they do good work. So,
and also shout outs to Honshu. We have an affiliate link if you're interested in the Honshu Viking sword as well as other things. And this is Cult of Athena, from Cult of Athena. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Like this Dane axe head, like it has the proper tapering.
Yep.
Right? Look at this. It's got the... And look, I have to say, Tyrant, you did a glorious job in hafting this. Tyrant shaped this handle.
From a 2x4.
From a 2x4.
By hand.
This is a glorious handle. This is just so deadly.
It sucked.
We might need to do a dedicated video on this.
But if you want to check out a video where Shad and Nate discuss Dane axes, it will be right here. And yeah, that should be all.
Check it out. Thank you for watching.